Marcus Chen had imagined his arrival at the Veridian capital many times, and in none of those imagined versions did the walls breathe. They did not breathe loudly. That would have been easier to process. Loud breathing could be categorized as machinery or faulty air circulation, or at worst, some kind of poorly understood biological ventilation system. Loud breathing could be explained. This was quieter than that. It was a slow, patient expansion and contraction beneath the translucent surfaces of the corridor, like the calm, steady respiration of something that had no reason to hurry. Marcus stepped out of the transport capsule and immediately regretted everything. Not the mission he still believed in. Mostly. It was the stepping part he regretted. The moment his polished diplomatic shoes touched the Veridian floor, the surface shifted subtly beneath him. Not enough to throw him off balance, but enough to make him question whether he was standing on architecture or on something that had opinions. He resisted the urge to apologize to the floor. He had promised himself during the 18-hour transit from the human diplomatic carrier, Resolute Dawn, that he would behave with dignity. No staring, no nervous jokes, no asking the alien queen whether her palace came with a user manual. So far, he was failing primarily on the staring portion. The corridor stretched ahead in smooth curved arcs, its surfaces glowing faintly with internal light. There were no visible seams, no joints, no bolts, no indication that it had ever been assembled. It had simply grown. Humanity built structures by forcing materials into obedience. The Veridians apparently negotiated with theirs. Marcus adjusted the sleeve of his uniform, mostly to give his hand something to do. The fabric felt suddenly too stiff, too artificial, as though it resented being here as much as he did. A soft chime echoed through the corridor. Marcus froze. The sound did not come from any visible device. It resonated through the walls themselves, vibrating faintly in his chest. For one alarming moment, he wondered if the building had just cleared its throat. "You're imagining things," he whispered to himself. The building did not deny it. He exhaled slowly and began walking forward, each step deliberate, measured. His training reasserted itself. He was not a tourist. He was not a civilian. He was Ambassador Marcus Chen of the United Earth Coalition, sent to negotiate the most fragile ceasefire in human history. He was also, unfortunately, a man currently trying not to offend the floor. At the end of the corridor, a figure emerged from the curved wall itself. Marcus stopped walking. She did not step through a doorway. There was no doorway. The wall simply parted around her like liquid crystal, folding back without sound. For a brief, deeply unsettling moment, Marcus wondered if she had always been there, waiting inside it. She was taller than him by a small but noticeable margin, her posture perfectly straight, her movements precise without appearing rigid. Her armor shimmered with faint iridescence, not reflecting light so much as bending it. Her face looked human. Almost. The proportions were familiar, the features symmetrical, the expression calm. And then there were her ears. They extended gracefully behind her head, long and elegant, subtly tapered, moving slightly as though responding to sounds Marcus could not hear. She studied him without speaking. Marcus reminded himself that staring was impolite. He stared anyway. There was something unnerving about her stillness. Not the stillness of hesitation, but the stillness of control. She was not waiting to see what he would do. She already knew. He realized with a mild surge of panic that she was waiting for him to speak. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. This had not happened in training. He cleared his throat. "Hello," he said. The words sounded absurdly small. She tilted her head slightly, observing him with an intensity that felt less like inspection and more like measurement. Marcus fought the sudden and irrational urge to explain himself. "Yes," he added, immediately regretting it. She did not react. This was going exceptionally well. He straightened his posture, reclaiming what remained of his dignity. "I am Ambassador Marcus Chen," he said carefully. She already knew that. Of course she knew that. He was the only human in the Veridian capital who looked like he had just realized buildings could breathe. Her gaze lingered on his face, then shifted slightly, taking in his stance, his hands, the minute tension in his shoulders. She gestured silently for him to follow. Marcus obeyed. He told himself it was because he had no alternative. This was technically true. They walked in silence. Her movements were smooth, efficient. She did not look back to see if he was keeping up. She did not need to. Marcus found himself matching her pace instinctively, adjusting his stride to her rhythm. He became acutely aware of his own breathing. Too fast. He slowed it. This was diplomacy. He had handled worse situations. He had once negotiated a mineral dispute between two human colonies that had escalated into a 17-hour argument about the definition of ownership. Compared to that, walking through a living alien palace beside a silent alien warrior was practically relaxing. He wondered briefly if she had a name. He wondered if asking would be considered offensive. He wondered if continuing to exist would be considered offensive. The corridor widened as they approached a vast chamber ahead. The air felt different here, charged, not electrically but emotionally, as though the space itself understood significance. She stopped. Marcus stopped beside her. For the first time since she had appeared, she spoke. "The Queen is waiting." Her voice was calm, clear, completely unafraid. Marcus nodded, though she had not asked a question. He suddenly became aware that everything that had come before, every briefing, every simulation, every carefully rehearsed statement, had only been preparation for this moment. Beyond that chamber waited Queen Sylara of the Veridian Empire. Marcus adjusted his uniform one final time. He had come here to stop a war. He had not expected the building to be the least intimidating part of the experience. Marcus decided very firmly that fainting in front of an alien queen would send the wrong diplomatic message. He did not know exactly what message it would send, but he was confident it would not be humanity as a stable and trustworthy negotiating partner. It would probably send something closer to human leadership collapses when exposed to mild architectural intimidation. He stood at the threshold of the chamber, aware that he had not moved for at least 3 seconds, which in diplomatic situations was roughly 3 seconds too long. The Veridian guard beside him did not rush him. She did not gesture again. She simply waited, her long ears angled slightly forward, as if listening to his hesitation itself. Marcus inhaled slowly and stepped forward. The chamber opened around him like the interior of a vast, luminous shell. The walls curved upward in smooth arcs, their translucent surfaces carrying slow pulses of pale blue and silver light that flowed in branching patterns like distant lightning trapped beneath ice. The air was warmer here, not uncomfortably so, but deliberately, intentionally. He had the strange impression that the room itself was maintaining conditions optimized for its occupant. He was not the occupant. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a gently rising platform that seemed to grow seamlessly from the floor, sat Queen Sylara. Marcus had seen images of her before: diplomatic intelligence files, reconnaissance captures, low-resolution recordings from distant surveillance drones that had not survived long enough to transmit much. None of them had been accurate. Images flattened her, reduced her. They turned her into something understandable. Reality did not cooperate. She did not move when he entered. She did not lean forward or shift or acknowledge his presence in any overt way. She simply sat, her posture relaxed yet absolute, as though motion itself were optional for her. Her face was calm, composed, unmistakably human in structure, and yet profoundly alien in presence. Her long ears extended behind her hair, elegant and precise, their subtle positioning conveying awareness even in stillness. Her eyes rested on him with quiet intensity, neither hostile nor welcoming. Marcus felt with sudden certainty that she had already decided several things about him. He hoped none of them involved vaporization. He approached the center of the chamber and stopped at what he hoped was an appropriate distance. No one had provided a marker, no helpful line on the floor labeled, "Stand here if you wish to survive." He settled for not walking directly up to her throne and waving. This felt wise. The silence stretched. Marcus realized with mounting horror that he was expected to speak first. Of course he was. He was the one who had come here. He was the one asking for peace. He opened his mouth. Every prepared sentence abandoned him. He had practiced for weeks, months. He had rehearsed introductions while brushing his teeth, while eating, while staring at the ceiling of his quarters aboard the Resolute Dawn. Now standing in front of the most powerful being he had ever encountered, his mind offered him only one deeply unhelpful thought. Do not say anything stupid. This instruction, unfortunately, did not include suggestions for what to say instead. He cleared his throat. Your Majesty, he said. His voice sounded smaller than he intended. Queen Sylara tilted her head slightly. The motion was minimal, precise, controlled. But it was unmistakably a reaction. Progress. I am Ambassador Marcus Chen of the United Earth Coalition. He paused. So far, this was acceptable. This was factual. This was unlikely to trigger interstellar conflict. Probably. I come in pursuit of peace. There. He had said it, not dramatically, not with the eloquence he had imagined, but honestly. Her gaze remained fixed on him. Marcus resisted the urge to continue speaking, simply to fill the silence. Silence, he reminded himself, was not failure. Silence was part of negotiation. Silence allowed the other party to consider. Silence also allowed him to become acutely aware of his own breathing again. Queen Sylara rose. The motion was smooth and unhurried, the crystalline surface beneath her responding as she stood, adjusting subtly as though accommodating her weight. She stepped down from the platform, her movements quiet, deliberate. She walked toward him. Marcus did not move. Running would be counterproductive. She stopped a short distance away, close enough that he could see details no image had captured. The faint variations in her skin tone, the subtle tension in her posture, the way her long ears shifted slightly responding to him. She was studying him. Not as one studies an enemy, as one studies something unexpected. You are afraid, she said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation. Marcus considered denying it. He chose not to. Yes, he said. A small pause followed. Then he added, but I came anyway. For the first time, something changed in her expression. Not a smile, not warmth, but interest. You speak without concealment, she said. Marcus blinked. He had been accused of many things in his career. Excessive caution, diplomatic evasion. Once, memorably, of using the phrase strategic ambiguity so often that an entire negotiation team had threatened to fine him for it. No one had ever accused him of lacking concealment. I've found, Marcus said carefully, that concealment tends to complicate conversations. This was perhaps the most diplomatic way he could phrase, lying makes everything worse. Her eyes remained on him. Most who stand before me conceal everything, she said. Marcus nodded slightly. That sounds exhausting. He regretted it immediately. He had not meant to say that. He had certainly not meant to say that to her. There was a pause. Marcus prepared himself for consequences. Instead, her ears shifted slightly, and her expression changed in a way he could not immediately interpret. It took him a moment to realize she was amused, not openly, not visibly to anyone unfamiliar with her, but unmistakably. Marcus felt a sudden irrational surge of relief. He had not been vaporized. Negotiations, he decided, were going surprisingly well so far, or at least surprisingly survivable. Queen Sylara studied him for another long moment. Then she spoke again. You will remain, she said. Marcus nodded. He had expected this. He had hoped for this. This meant she had not rejected him. This meant peace was still possible. He exhaled slowly, only now realizing how tightly he had been holding himself together. He had come here carrying the weight of two civilizations. Now, standing in the presence of the alien queen, he realized something far more unsettling. She was not what he had expected, and somehow that made everything more dangerous. Marcus did not sleep. This was not entirely the Veridian Empire's fault. Some of the blame belonged to his own brain, which had decided that replaying every second of his conversation with Queen Sylara was far more productive than unconsciousness. He lay on a surface that had reshaped itself the moment he had approached it, forming a gently contoured structure that supported his spine with unnerving precision. It did not feel like a bed. It felt like something that had analyzed the concept of comfort and implemented it better than humanity ever had. That alone would have been enough to keep him awake. The room itself glowed faintly, the walls carrying slow ripples of pale light that resembled distant bioluminescent tides. There were no visible fixtures, no corners, no shadows deep enough to hide anything, which Marcus suspected was the point. He turned his head slightly. The wall nearest him responded. Not dramatically. It did not open or change shape. It simply shifted its glow, brightening subtly as though acknowledging his attention. Marcus stared at it. The wall stared back, in its own quiet architectural way. "Hello," he whispered. The wall did not reply. He nodded once. That was probably for the best. He sat up slowly, planting his feet on the floor. The surface beneath him adjusted again, compensating instantly for his weight. He had the unpleasant realization that the palace knew exactly where he was at all times, which meant it also knew he was not sleeping, which meant, theoretically, Queen Sylara could also know he was not sleeping. He paused. He suddenly became very interested in pretending he had always been awake intentionally. He stood and walked toward the curved opening that served as a doorway. It did not open automatically. It waited. Marcus stopped in front of it. He cleared his throat. "Open," he said. Nothing happened. He frowned. "Please open," he added. The doorway remained closed. Marcus crossed his arms. He was Ambassador Marcus Chen, representative of the United Earth Coalition, survivor of his own awkward introductions, and current resident of what might be the most advanced palace in known space. He would not be defeated by a door. He leaned slightly closer. "I am attempting to leave," he said with careful authority. The doorway remained unimpressed. Marcus sighed. He had just finished negotiating with an alien queen. He should not now be negotiating with her hallway. Behind him, the wall emitted a faint, almost musical tone. Marcus turned. A section of the surface flowed aside, revealing an opening he was certain had not been there before. "You could have done that earlier," he muttered. The palace did not apologize. He stepped into the corridor. It was quieter now than it had been during his arrival, though quiet was relative. The walls still carried their faint internal glow, and the air still held that subtle sense of awareness that made Marcus feel less like a guest and more like a carefully monitored experiment. He walked slowly, unsure where he was going, but confident that standing still indefinitely would eventually become embarrassing. He turned a corner. She was there. Queen Sylara stood near a wide, curved opening that overlooked the distant city beyond the palace walls. The vast Veridian capital stretched outward in layered terraces and towering crystalline structures, each glowing faintly in the early planetary dawn. Marcus stopped instantly. He had not expected to see her here. He had not expected to see her anywhere without formal announcement, ceremonial preparation, and at least 3 opportunities for him to accidentally embarrass himself. She turned her head slightly. Her long ears shifted first, detecting him before her eyes did. He felt seen before she even looked at him. "Ambassador," she said. Her voice was calm, not surprised, not annoyed, just aware. Marcus resisted the urge to apologize for existing in her general vicinity. "Your Majesty," he replied. He hesitated, then he added, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." She considered him for a moment. "You are awake," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yes." This was an accurate summary of his condition. She studied him with quiet intensity. "You do not rest easily." It was not a question. Marcus allowed himself a small, tired smile. "I tend to rest better when I'm not inside a sentient building." Her ears shifted slightly. He could not tell if she understood the joke. He was not entirely sure he understood it either. After a moment, she spoke again. "The palace is not sentient." Marcus glanced at the wall beside him. The wall remained suspiciously quiet. "That's exactly what a sentient building would say," Marcus replied. There was a pause. Her expression remained composed. But there was something there, something almost like curiosity. "You fear it," she said. Marcus considered that. "Yes," he admitted. Another pause. Then he added, "But I also think it's impressive." Her gaze remained steady. Marcus realized suddenly that this moment was different from their previous encounter. There was no court, no observers, no political theater, just the two of them, and the possibly judgmental architecture. She stepped slightly closer to the opening overlooking the city. Marcus joined her, careful to maintain respectful distance. The city below was vast beyond comprehension. Structures rose and curved in impossible geometries, their surfaces alive with motion and light. Small aerial craft moved between them in silent patterns, their trajectories precise and effortless. "It is beautiful," Marcus said quietly. "Yes," she replied. He glanced at her. She was not looking at the city, she was looking at him. Marcus suddenly became very aware of his posture. He straightened slightly. This was, he reminded himself, a diplomatic mission, not an existential evaluation by an alien monarch. "You came alone," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yes. You are not a warrior." "No. You are not protected." He smiled faintly. "I am protected." She tilted her head slightly. He gestured vaguely upward. "By optimism." She stared at him. Marcus waited. Then after a moment, her ears shifted again. And he realized. She was amused. Not openly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Marcus exhaled slowly. For the first time since his arrival, he felt something unfamiliar. Not safety, not certainty, but possibility. He had come here to negotiate peace. He had not expected his most dangerous opponent to be her curiosity. Marcus learned very quickly that the Veridian Empire did not do anything casually. Even breakfast was a strategic event. He stood in the center of a circular chamber that had grown itself into existence sometime between his early morning encounter with Queen Sylara and his current state of mild confusion. The surface before him rose smoothly from the floor, forming a table whose texture resembled polished glass and living tissue at the same time. Objects rested upon it, if rested was the correct word. They hovered slightly, rotating with slow, deliberate motion, as though unsure whether they wanted to be eaten or admired. Marcus stared at one of them. It was roughly the size of an apple, softly glowing, and appeared to have layers that moved independently beneath its surface. It was watching him. He was almost certain of that. He folded his arms. "I want you to know," he said quietly to the glowing object, "this relationship is built entirely on trust." The object did not respond. This was not reassuring. A faint chime resonated through the chamber. Marcus turned. Queen Sylara entered without escort, her movements as silent and precise as always. Her presence altered the atmosphere instantly, not through force, but through certainty. She did not need guards here. The palace itself was her guard. Her eyes moved to the table, then to him. "You have not eaten," she observed. Marcus gestured toward the hovering object. "I didn't want to offend it." She tilted her head slightly. "It cannot be offended." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's exactly what something capable of offense would want me to believe." Her long ears shifted subtly, though her expression remained composed. She stepped closer to the table and reached out. The glowing object drifted toward her hand, responding instantly to her presence. She held it briefly, then pressed her fingers gently against its surface. The glow dimmed and the layered movement inside slowed. She handed it to him. Marcus accepted it carefully, holding it as one might hold something that had not yet decided what it was. "It is nourishment," she said. He examined it. It examined him. He sighed softly. "I've eaten worse things," he admitted. This was technically true. Human military rations had once included something labeled simply protein composite, which Marcus suspected had been designed by someone who resented humanity. He raised the object slightly. "If this tries to bite me," he said, "I will take it personally." She did not reply. He took a careful bite. The surface dissolved instantly, releasing a burst of flavor that was impossible to categorize. It was sweet, but not sugary, warm, but not hot, familiar, yet entirely alien. The sensation spread through him in waves, and he realized, with mild astonishment, that he was no longer tired. He blinked. "That's effective." She watched him closely. "The palace adapts its nourishment to the needs of the individual." Marcus stared at the remaining portion in his hand. "So it knows I'm exhausted?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "That's deeply unsettling." He finished eating it anyway. They stood in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable silence, just quiet. She studied him again, the same careful observation he had begun to recognize. Not cold, not distant. Curious. You do not behave as expected, she said. Marcus smiled faintly. I've been told that before. She considered him. Most who stand before me attempt to impress. Marcus glanced down at himself. I could try standing taller. Her ears shifted slightly. He was beginning to suspect that was the Veridian equivalent of a smile. Why did you come alone, she asked. The question carried no accusation, only interest. Marcus leaned slightly against the edge of the table. Because sending an army would have been the wrong message. Her gaze sharpened. And what message did you intend? He met her eyes. That peace requires trust. The words hung between them. Simple, dangerous. She stepped closer. Not threateningly, intentionally. Trust, she repeated. The words sounded unfamiliar in her voice, as though it belonged to a language she had not spoken in a long time. You trust me, she said. It was not a question. Marcus hesitated. Honesty had brought him this far. Yes, he said. Her expression did not change. But something shifted, something subtle, something real. You should not, she said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. That's a very concerning thing for you to say. Another pause, then, unexpectedly, she turned away, her gaze moving toward the curved wall of the chamber. You are vulnerable here, she said. Marcus considered that. Yes. She looked back at him. You understand this? Yes. And you came anyway. He smiled faintly. Yes. Her long ears shifted again, reacting to something deeper than his words. Marcus realized suddenly that she was not questioning his decision. She was questioning his nature. He was too. He had come here to negotiate treaties, to present terms, to argue policy and strategy. Instead, he found himself standing alone with an alien queen, discussing trust over breakfast with something that had tried very hard to resemble fruit. This was not how diplomacy was supposed to work. This was something else, something far more fragile and far more dangerous. Marcus was beginning to suspect that the Veridian Empire had mastered the art of making him feel unprepared in entirely new ways. It was not the palace. He had already accepted that the palace was alive in ways that made human engineering look like children stacking rocks. It was not the food either, though he still did not fully trust anything that glowed before he bit it. It was the court. More specifically, it was the way they watched him. He stood beside Queen Sylara at the center of a vast chamber, whose ceiling curved upward into translucent infinity. Tall Veridian nobles formed a wide circle around them, their forms elegant and still, their long ears angled in subtle variations that Marcus was beginning to recognize as communication. None of them spoke. None of them moved. They simply observed. Marcus had the unpleasant sensation of being the least impressive object in the room, which, given the room itself was capable of breathing, was saying something. He kept his posture upright, his expression calm, and his hands very deliberately at his sides. He had learned early in his diplomatic career that fidgeting suggested uncertainty. Unfortunately, not fidgeting required extreme concentration. He wondered briefly if anyone would notice if he slowly leaned against something. He decided they would. Queen Sylara stepped forward slightly. The movement was small, but the reaction it produced was immediate. Every Veridian present shifted their attention fully to her, their focus absolute and unquestioning. Marcus felt it too. Power did not radiate from her, it condensed around her. These are the witnesses, she said quietly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. Marcus nodded once. Witnesses, not advisors, not participants. Witnesses. This was not negotiation. This was judgment. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. He had practiced statements, responses, arguments designed to withstand scrutiny from minds older and more experienced than his own. He had not prepared for how personal it would feel. A Veridian noble stepped forward. She was taller than Sylara, her posture rigid, her expression perfectly controlled. Her long ears angled slightly forward, locked on Marcus with surgical precision. This is the human, she said. It was not phrased as a question. Marcus resisted the urge to check behind himself. I am, he replied. Her gaze did not soften. You stand unarmed. Marcus nodded. Yes. She waited. He realized she expected more. He considered his options. I was advised it would improve my chances of survival, he added. There was a pause. Her ears shifted slightly. He could not tell if he had just offended her or confused her. Possibly both. You stand without protection, she continued. Marcus glanced briefly at Queen Sylara, then back at the noble. I was under the impression, he said carefully, that I am currently standing beside the most powerful individual in this empire. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Marcus wondered if he had just violated 17 cultural protocols. Then slowly, Sylara's ears shifted. He recognized the movement now. Amusement. The noble studied him for a long moment. You rely on words, she said. Marcus nodded. They've worked so far. This was not entirely accurate, but it sounded confident. The noble turned to Sylara. This one is fragile. Marcus inhaled slowly. He had been called worse. Sylara did not immediately respond. Her gaze remained on Marcus. He is human, she said simply. The noble tilted her head slightly. That is not an explanation. Sylara's voice did not change. It is sufficient. Marcus did not fully understand what had just happened, but he was reasonably certain Sylara had defended him. He resisted the urge to thank her out loud. Diplomatic survival, he reminded himself, required restraint. The noble stepped back into the circle. The court remained silent. Marcus realized gradually that they were not evaluating his strength. They were evaluating his presence, his calm, his willingness to stand here, exposed in the center of an empire that had every reason to distrust him. It occurred to him that this was not about power. It was about courage. He found that deeply inconvenient. Sylara turned slightly toward him. You understand the risk, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Yes. He hesitated. Then he added, I try not to think about it too much. Her ears shifted. Why? Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Because thinking about it doesn't make it less risky. She studied him again. He realized she was not evaluating his answer. She was evaluating him. You are not like the others, she said. Marcus considered that. I'm beginning to suspect that's either very good or very bad. She did not reply, but she did not look away. Around them, the court continued its silent observation. Marcus stood his ground, not because he was fearless, but because leaving was no longer an option, not just politically, personally. He had come here to convince an empire to trust him. He had not expected to realize how much he trusted her. Marcus was absolutely certain that the balcony had not been there yesterday. He stood in front of the curved wall of his chamber, staring at the opening that had quietly unfolded itself sometime during his absence. Beyond it stretched the vast skyline of the Veridian capital, glowing softly under the violet haze of the planet's upper atmosphere. Towering crystalline structures rose in layered formations, their surfaces shifting with slow pulses of internal light like enormous, patient hearts. He crossed his arms. I liked it better when you pretended to be normal architecture, he told the wall. The wall did not apologize. He stepped onto the balcony carefully, half expecting it to retract under his weight out of spite. It did not. The surface remained firm, warm, and faintly responsive, as though acknowledging his presence without fully committing to liking him. He leaned slightly forward, gazing at the distant movement of aerial transports gliding silently between the structures. Their motion was effortless, precise, without turbulence or noise. Human ships, he thought, always sounded like they were fighting the universe. Veridian ships sounded like they had convinced it to cooperate. You observe often. Marcus turned. Queen Sylara stood behind him. He had not heard her approach. He was beginning to accept that hearing her approach was not an option available to him. I try to, he replied. It helps remind me how small I am. She stepped beside him, her gaze moving across the city. You are not small, she said. Marcus glanced at her. I appreciate the encouragement, he said, but I'm fairly certain I'm shorter than most of your doorways. Her ears shifted slightly. He was becoming dangerously fond of that reaction. She rested her hands lightly on the edge of the balcony, her posture calm, balanced, completely at ease. Marcus noticed, not for the first time, how precise her stillness was. It was not rigid. It was intentional. Like a predator that had learned patience so thoroughly it no longer needed tension. "You do not fear me," she said. Marcus considered that carefully. "I did," he admitted. She turned her head slightly. "Did?" "Yes." She studied him. "What changed?" Marcus exhaled softly. He searched for an answer that would be honest without being catastrophically inappropriate. "You haven't killed me," he said. She stared at him. He added quickly, "That raised my confidence." Her ears shifted again. He was almost certain that was approval. Almost. Silence settled between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It had weight, but not pressure. The kind of silence that formed when two people stopped trying to control the outcome of a conversation. She spoke again. "There are those who believe you are a weakness." Marcus nodded. "I believe that too sometimes." Her gaze sharpened slightly. "You accept this." Marcus shrugged faintly. "I'm not a soldier. I don't command fleets. I can't destroy planets or conquer systems. All I can do is talk." He paused, "which is either extremely useful or completely useless." She watched him closely. "In my empire," she said, "strength is clarity, action without hesitation." Marcus nodded slowly. "In mine, he replied, strength is restraint, action delayed until it matters." Her long ears shifted, reacting not to the words themselves, but to something beneath them. He realized she was not evaluating his logic. She was evaluating his belief. "You carry no weapon," she said. Marcus raised his hand slightly. "I carry several." Her eyes narrowed. He smiled faintly. "None of them are visible." She held his gaze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Marcus realized suddenly that this was the most dangerous moment he had experienced since arriving. Not because of threat, because of understanding. She stepped closer. Not close enough to invade his space, close enough to erase the distance between strangers. "You are not like the others," she said again. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I'm starting to think that worries you." She did not answer immediately. He wondered if he had overstepped. Then she spoke. "It complicates certainty." Marcus laughed softly. "I've been complicating certainty my entire life." Her ears shifted sharply. He stopped laughing. "That was not intended as a threat," he added. She continued watching him. He suddenly became aware of how quiet the entire city was from this height. No engines, no shouting, no chaos, just motion, just existence. "You came alone," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yes." "You trusted me." He hesitated. "Yes." She turned fully toward him now. Her presence filled the space in a way that had nothing to do with size. "Why?" The question was quiet, not political, not strategic, personal. Marcus swallowed, because he did not have a diplomatic answer, because the real answer was simple, because I believed you would listen. Silence, not empty silence, heavy silence. Her gaze remained locked on his. Marcus realized with sudden clarity that this moment mattered more than any speech he could give, more than any treaty he could sign. This was not about empires. This was about trust. She stepped even closer now, close enough that he could see the smallest details of her expression, close enough that leaving would have felt like betrayal. "You are vulnerable," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yes." Her voice softened slightly. "And you remain." He smiled faintly. "Yes." Her ears shifted once more. He understood now. She was no longer studying him. She was deciding what he meant. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment the palace stopped pretending to be calm. He had grown accustomed to its quiet awareness, the subtle shifts in light, the faint, organic pulses beneath the surfaces. The palace was never truly still, but it was predictable in its stillness. Now it was different. The glow along the walls flickered in uneven rhythms, like a heartbeat skipping without permission. He stood in the central chamber, alone, watching the change happen in real time. The palace was reacting, which meant something had forced it to react. He folded his arms, staring at the curved wall in front of him. "I would appreciate clarification," he said to it. The wall remained stubbornly unhelpful. Footsteps approached behind him. He turned. Queen Sylara walked toward him, her posture composed but her eyes sharper than he had ever seen them. Her long ears were angled forward, alert, focused on something far beyond the chamber. Marcus straightened instinctively. "That doesn't look like your relaxed expression," he said carefully. She stopped in front of him. "There has been an attempt." Marcus blinked. "On the negotiations?" Her gaze did not waver. "On you." Marcus paused. He absorbed this information slowly, as though it might behave better if processed calmly. "That seems rude," he said. Her ears shifted slightly, but her expression remained serious. "They do not understand your presence." Marcus nodded. "That makes two of us." She stepped closer. "The court is divided. There are those who believe peace weakens us." Marcus considered that. "That's a popular opinion in most civilizations." Her gaze sharpened. "They will act again." He studied her face. She was not afraid. She was resolved. Marcus realized suddenly that this was the moment everything had been moving toward. Not the negotiations, not the speeches. This. Choice. He inhaled slowly. "I didn't come here expecting everyone to agree," he said. Her voice was quiet. "You came expecting risk." "Yes." She held his gaze. "You remain." Marcus smiled faintly. "I've made it this far. It would be embarrassing to leave now." Her ears shifted again. He wondered briefly if Veridian historians would one day record that humanity's survival had depended heavily on his refusal to accept embarrassment. The chamber behind her opened. Several Veridian nobles entered, their movements precise, their expressions rigid. The same noble who had questioned him before stepped forward. "This human has destabilized the empire," she said. Marcus resisted the urge to apologize. Sylara did not turn to face her. "This human has revealed the empire," Sylara replied. The noble's ears angled sharply. "He weakens certainty." Silara's voice did not change. "He strengthens truth." Silence fell. Marcus realized with growing awareness that this was no longer about him. This was about her choice, her authority, her willingness to step beyond the expectations that had defined her entire existence. The noble spoke again. "He is vulnerable." Sylara turned slightly. "Yes," she said. The noble paused. This was not the answer she had expected. Sylara continued. "And he came anyway." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not relief, understanding. The noble studied Sylara for a long moment. Then slowly she stepped back. Not in defeat, in acceptance. The others followed. The chamber fell silent again. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I'm starting to think I was the easy part," he said. Sylara turned toward him. "You were the necessary part." He smiled faintly. "I'll accept that." The tension that had filled the palace began to ease. The lights stabilized. The subtle pulses returned to their calm, steady rhythm. The palace was breathing normally again. Marcus stepped closer to the balcony opening. The Veridian capital stretched before him, vast and alive. He had arrived here as a diplomat, careful, guarded, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Now he understood something he had not understood before. Peace was not negotiated into existence, it was chosen. Behind him, Sylara stepped beside him once more. "The court will follow," she said. Marcus nodded. "They trust you." She was quiet for a moment. "They trust what I have chosen?" Marcus glanced at her. "And what have you chosen?" Her gaze remained on the horizon. "The future." Marcus smiled. He realized finally that he was no longer afraid of this place. Not because it had become less dangerous, but because he had changed. He was still vulnerable, still human, still uncertain. But he was no longer standing here as someone asking for peace. He was standing here as someone who had helped create it. He crossed his arms lightly. "I should probably report back," he said. She looked at him. "Yes." He hesitated. He had expected this moment to feel like an ending. It did not. It felt like something else. He met her eyes. "I came here for peace negotiations," he said. Her ears shifted softly. "Yes." He allowed himself a small smile. "I didn't expect to find someone who understood why peace matters." She held his gaze. "You showed me." Silence settled between them again, not uncertain, complete. For the first time since his arrival, Marcus Chen felt exactly where he was meant to be. Not as a diplomat, not as an outsider, but as someone who had crossed the distance between two worlds and found something neither of them had expected. Not victory, not conquest, trust. And this time the palace did not feel like it was watching him. It felt like it was welcoming him.